The freighter called Wandering Star moved slowly through the dark space of the outer rim. It was an old ship with rust on its walls and broken lights that flickered every few minutes. The ship carried many things that were not legal: weapons, drugs, and in Cargo Bay 7 it carried people. 17 prisoners sat chained to the metal wall. Their hands were locked in heavy cuffs that connected to thick chains. The chains were bolted into the wall so strongly that even the biggest prisoner could not pull them free. The air smelled bad. It smelled like fear and sweat and old blood that nobody had cleaned. The prisoners came from many different planets. There were tall blue-skinned who shook with fear. There were small furry creatures from the mining worlds who cried quietly. There were 2 other humans, both men, both looking at the floor with empty eyes. And there was sat in the corner of the cargo hold. She was a small woman with black hair that fell past her shoulders. Her face was dirty and her clothes were torn. She looked like nothing special. She looked like exactly what the slavers thought she was: a weak human female who would sell well at the fighting pits of station. The slavers had found her on a small mining colony 3 weeks ago. The colony had no real security. It had no weapons that could stop a slaver ship. They had landed, taken what they wanted, and left. They took supplies. They took equipment. And they took 7 colonists, including. They were a reptile species. They stood 7 feet tall on average. Their scales were thick like armor, colored in shades of black and dark green. Their eyes were yellow with thin slits for pupils. They had ruled this sector of space for hundreds of years, and they believed they were the strongest species in the galaxy. Humans, they believed, were weak. Humans had soft skin that cut easily. Humans had small muscles compared to their body size. Humans could not see in the dark. Humans could not survive extreme temperatures. Every child learned these facts in school. Humans were prey animals that had somehow developed technology. Nothing more. Was the head guard of Cargo Bay 7. He was large even for us, standing nearly 8 feet tall. His scales were black as night, and a long scar ran down the left side of his face. He had been a slaver for 40 years. He had transported thousands of prisoners to station. He knew how to break them. Most prisoners broke within the first few days. They cried. They begged. They promised anything if the guards would just be a little kinder. Enjoyed this part of his job. He enjoyed watching the hope drain from their eyes. He enjoyed the moment when they finally understood that their old life was gone forever. But this human woman was different. She did not cry. She did not beg. She sat in her corner with her eyes half closed, watching everything and saying nothing. It had been 3 weeks and she had not spoken more than 10 words. This annoyed very much. He walked across the cargo hold, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. The other prisoners moved away from him as much as their chains allowed. They knew what was coming. They had seen it before. Stopped in front of. He looked down at her with his yellow eyes. She looked up at him with no expression on her face. "You," he growled. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "Why don't you scream like the others?" Blinked slowly. When she spoke, her voice was calm and quiet. "There is nothing to scream about, yet." The other 5 guards in the cargo hold laughed. They stood near the door, holding their weapons and watching the entertainment. They had seen break hundreds of prisoners. This small human would be no different. Did not laugh. He felt something strange when the human spoke, something that almost felt like a warning, but that was stupid. She was just a human. What could she possibly do? He backhanded her across the face. The sound was loud in the quiet cargo hold. His head snapped to the side. Blood appeared on her lip where his scales had cut her skin. The other prisoners looked away. Some of them whispered prayers to gods that had never helped them. But did not cry out. She did not beg him to stop. She simply turned her head back to look at him. Her eyes were the same as before, calm, watching, waiting. She raised her shoulder and wiped the blood from her lip. Then she spoke again, in that same quiet voice. "Please, do not hit me again." The guards at the door laughed even harder. One of them, a young named, slapped his knee and pointed at her. "The tiny human is asking nicely," he said between laughs. "How polite." Smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "You do not give orders here, human. You are cargo. You are property. You will learn your place or you will suffer." "I gave you a warning," said. Her voice was still calm, but something in it had changed. Something small. Something that made the human man chained 3 spots away suddenly feel very cold. "That was your one chance." Leaned down so his face was close to hers. His breath smelled like rotting meat. "Warning? You think you are warning me?" He laughed and turned to look at his crew. "Did you hear that? The tiny human is warning me." The guards laughed again. This was the best entertainment they had in weeks. Grabbed jaw with his large hand. His claws dug into her skin, leaving small marks. He forced her to look directly into his eyes. "By the time we reach station," he said slowly, "you will beg for death. You will forget your own name. You will forget you were ever anything but a slave, and you will thank me for teaching you." Did not try to pull away. She did not close her eyes. She just looked at him with that same calm expression. "You should have listened," she said. Raised his hand to hit her again. He was going to hit her much harder this time. He was going to break her nose, maybe some teeth. That would teach her to speak to him with such disrespect. His hand came down. It never reached her face. In the time it took to blink, everything changed. There was a sound of metal sliding against metal. There was a flash of movement too fast for his eyes to follow. And then there was pain. Looked down. His own knife was buried in his throat. The handle stuck out from his scales and dark blood poured down his chest. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgling sound came out. The last thing he saw before he died was face. She was no longer sitting against the wall. She was standing in front of him, her chains hanging empty from her wrists. Her hands were red with his blood. And she was smiling. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the cargo hold moved. The guards at the door stared at its body as it fell to the floor. The prisoners stared at the small human woman standing over him. The only sound was the quiet dripping of blood onto metal. Had known something was wrong the moment spoke her warning. He had served 8 years in the Colonial Defense Force before his capture. He had trained with soldiers from dozens of human worlds. He had seen combat on 3 different planets, and he had learned to recognize danger when he saw it. This woman was danger. He had noticed small things during the 3 weeks of their captivity. The way she watched the guards, memorizing their movements and their schedules. The way she tested her chains each night when she thought nobody was looking. The way her breathing changed whenever came close, becoming slow and controlled like a predator waiting to strike. Had tried to warn the merchant chained next to him, but the merchant had not understood. Nobody understood. They all thought was just another victim waiting to die. Now they understood. "Move back," hissed at the other prisoners. "Get as far from the center as you can." They obeyed without question, pressing themselves against the wall. Their chains rattled as they tried to make themselves as small as possible. Was the first guard to recover from his shock. He was young and stupid and thought he was brave. He raised his pulse rifle and pointed it at. "Stop right there," he shouted. His voice was higher than normal. He was scared and everyone could hear it. Get on the ground now." Turned to look at him. She still held his knife in her right hand. Blood dripped from the blade onto the floor. "You have 2 choices," she said. Her voice was calm and pleasant like she was discussing the weather. "You can put down your weapons and unlock these prisoners, or you can die like your friend." His finger tightened on the trigger. "I said get on the ground, you." He never finished the sentence. Threw the knife. It flew across the cargo hold faster than the eye could follow. It hit in the throat in the exact same spot where she had stabbed. He dropped his rifle and grabbed at his neck with both hands. Blood sprayed between his fingers. He fell to his knees, then onto his face, and did not move again. The other 4 guards finally reacted. They had been slavers for many years. They had fought pirates and bounty hunters and rival gangs. They thought they knew how to handle violence. They were wrong. 2 of them raised their rifles and fired. The blue pulse shots lit up the cargo hold like lightning, but was no longer where she had been standing. She moved between the shots like water flowing around rocks. She was fast. She was impossibly fast. The first guard who had fired was named. He was a veteran of 30 years. He had killed more people than he could remember. He was not afraid of anything. He was afraid now. Reached him before he could fire a second shot. She grabbed his rifle and twisted it out of his hands. Then she hit him in the throat with her palm. The blow crushed his windpipe. He fell to the floor, choking on his own blood, unable to breathe. The second guard tried to run. He turned toward the door, thinking he could escape and call for help, picked up the rifle she had taken from and shot him in the back. He fell forward and did not get up. 2 guards remained. They stood side by side, their weapons raised, their yellow eyes wide with fear. They had never seen anything like this. They had never imagined that a human could do these things. "What are you?" one of them whispered. Did not answer. She moved toward them like a shadow, like a nightmare given form. The first guard fired 3 times. Each shot missed. She was too fast, too unpredictable. She ducked and weaved and somehow ended up behind him. She grabbed his head with both hands and twisted. There was a loud crack and he fell. The last guard dropped his weapon. He fell to his knees and raised his hands above his head. "Please," he begged. Tears ran down his scaled face. "Please, I surrender, I give up. Please do not kill me." Stood over him. She looked down at his crying face for a long moment. Then she kicked him hard in the head. He fell sideways and lay still, unconscious but alive. The cargo hold was silent again. Walked his body and searched his pockets. She found and used it to unlock the chains of the nearest prisoner, a trembling who could not stop staring at her. "Help the others," she said, handing him the, "I need to deal with the rest of the ship." The rest of the ship spoke from his spot against the wall. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. "There are at least 20 more guards between here and the bridge, plus the crew, plus the captain." "I know," said. She picked up 2 pulse rifles and checked their power levels. She found a belt on one of the dead guards and strapped it around her waist. She added 3 more knives and a small pistol. "You cannot fight them all alone," said. Looked at him. For the first time since he had seen her, she showed something that might have been humor. A small smile crossed her face. "Watch me," she said. She walked to the cargo bay door. She pressed her hand against the control panel, and the door slid open. The hallway beyond was dark and empty. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to sound. Someone had noticed that the guards in Cargo Bay 7 were not answering their communications. Stepped into the hallway and disappeared into the shadows. Behind her, finally managed to pull his thoughts together. He had spent 3 weeks thinking about escape. He had imagined dozens of plans, each one more hopeless than the last. He had accepted that he would die in the fighting pits of Station. Now everything had changed. The finished unlocking his chains and moved to the next prisoner. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold the. "What was she?" he asked. "What kind of human was that?" Rubbed his wrists where the chains had rubbed them raw. He thought about all the rumors he had heard during his time in the Colonial Defense Force. Rumors about special units. Rumors about soldiers who could do impossible things. Rumors that everyone. "The kind of human," he said slowly, "that we are not supposed to know exists." In the distance they heard the sound of gunfire, then screaming, then silence. Was doing exactly what she had promised. She was dealing with the rest of the ship. The alarm screamed through every corridor of the wandering star. Red lights flashed on the walls. Crew members ran in every direction, grabbing weapons and shouting orders at each other. Nobody knew exactly what was happening in Cargo Bay 7, but they knew it was bad. Captain Tal stood on the bridge, watching the security screens with growing confusion. He was old for nearly 200 years. He had been a slaver for most of his life. He had seen mutinies and attacks and every kind of trouble that could happen on a ship, but he had never seen anything like this. The cameras in Cargo Bay 7 showed only bodies. 6 of his best guards lay dead on the floor. The prisoners were free from their chains, huddled in the corner like scared animals, and somewhere on his ship, something was hunting his crew. "Report," he barked at his second officer. "What is happening down there?" "We do not know, Captain." The officer's voice was shaking. "The guards are not responding. We sent a team of 12 to investigate. And they are also not responding." Tal felt something cold in his stomach. It was a feeling he had not experienced in many years. It was fear. "Show me the corridor cameras," he ordered. The screens changed. They showed the main corridor leading from Cargo Bay 7 toward the center of the ship. At first, Tal saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed the bodies. They lay in small groups along the corridor, 2 near the cargo bay door, 3 more at the first intersection, 4 around the corner by the maintenance shaft. Each one had been killed quickly and efficiently. Some had been shot. Some had been stabbed. Some had their necks broken at strange angles. "There," the officer said, pointing at one of the screens. "Movement." Tal leaned forward and stared at the image. For a moment he saw nothing. Then a shadow moved across the frame. It was small and fast, barely visible in the flickering red lights. It disappeared around a corner, and 3 seconds later 2 more of his crew fell dead. "What is that?" Tal whispered. "I think," the officer swallowed hard, "I think it is the human, the female from the mining colony." "Impossible," Tal shook his head. "One human cannot do this. Humans are weak. Humans are prey." "Captain, look." The screens showed another group of guards rushing down a corridor toward the threat. There were 8 of them, all armed with pulse rifles and shock batons. They moved in proper formation, covering all angles. They were trained soldiers who had fought in a dozen conflicts. The human woman stepped out of a side door behind them. She moved like nothing Tal had ever seen. She did not fight like using strength and power to crush her enemies. She did not fight like using speed to hit and run away. She fought like water, flowing around attacks and through defenses like they were not there. The first guard died before he even knew she was behind him. She grabbed his head and twisted, dropping him to the floor in one smooth motion. The second guard turned and raised his weapon, but she was already inside his reach. She took his rifle, turned it around, and shot the third guard in the face. Then she used the butt of the rifle to break the second guard's skull. The remaining 5 guards tried to form a defensive circle. They fired their weapons in all directions, filling the corridor with blue pulse shots. The woman dropped to the floor and rolled under their fire. She came up in the center of their circle and began to kill them one by one. It took less than 30 seconds. When it was over, she stood alone among the bodies. She was breathing a little harder now, and there was blood on her clothes, but she did not seem hurt. She looked up at the camera directly, as if she knew Tal was watching. Then she smiled and continued walking toward the bridge. Tal felt the cold in his stomach spread through his whole body. He had transported humans before, dozens of them, hundreds maybe. They had always been easy targets. They cried and begged and broke under the smallest pressure. They were the weakest species in the galaxy. Or so he had thought. "Seal the bridge," he ordered. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "All remaining crew report to the bridge immediately. Set up defensive positions. We will make our stand here." "Captain," the officer said hesitantly, "should we not try to negotiate? Perhaps she wants something. Perhaps we can make a deal." "Look at the screens," Tal said. "Does that look like someone who wants to make a deal?" The officer looked at the cameras showing the trail of bodies leading toward them. He did not answer. Over the next 10 minutes, more crew members arrived at the bridge. Some came from the engine room. Some came from the weapon systems. Some came from their sleeping quarters, still half-dressed and confused. In total, 15 gathered in the bridge, all armed, all scared. They sealed the heavy blast doors. They set up barriers using furniture and equipment. They pointed every weapon at the entrance and waited. The ship became quiet. The alarm had stopped at some point, though nobody could remember when. The red lights continued to flash, throwing strange shadows across the walls. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then they heard footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps coming closer and closer. They echoed through the metal corridors like a heartbeat. Step, 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 each one bringing death nearer to the bridge. The footsteps stopped outside the blast doors. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crew held their breath. Their fingers trembled on their triggers. Some of them whispered prayers to old gods they had not believed in for years. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness fell over the bridge. Someone screamed. Weapons fired blindly, pulse shots lighting up the room in brief flashes of blue. In those flashes, the crew caught glimpses of something moving among them, something small and fast and terrible. When the emergency lights finally came on, it was over. 14 lay dead on the bridge floor. Some had been shot. Some had been stabbed. Some had killed each other in the panic and darkness, unable to tell friend from enemy. Only Captain Tal remained alive. He sat in his command chair, unable to move, staring at the human woman who stood before him. She was covered in blood from head to toe. Her black hair hung in wet strings around her face. Her hands, small and fragile-looking, dripped red onto the metal floor. She looked at him with calm eyes, and he understood something that changed everything he believed about the galaxy. Humans were not weak. Humans were not prey. Humans were something far more dangerous. They were predators who had learned to hide in plain sight. "You and I," said quietly, "need to have a conversation." Tal could not find his voice to respond. He could only nod and pray that somehow he would survive the next few minutes. Captain Tal had lived for nearly 200 years. He had survived wars and betrayals and assassination attempts. He had built an empire of suffering and grown rich from the pain of others. He had always believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. Now he sat in his own command chair, surrounded by the bodies of his crew, facing a small human woman who had destroyed everything in 20 minutes. "What are you?" he managed to whisper. Wiped some of the blood from her face with a piece of cloth she had torn from a dead guard's uniform. She did not hurry. She did not seem concerned that Tal might try to attack her or call for help. She knew there was no one left to help him. "I am human," she said simply. "Humans cannot do what you did." Tal shook his head. His voice was getting stronger now, though fear still made it shake. "I have transported hundreds of humans. They are weak. They break easily. They cannot fight like you fight." Finished cleaning her face and threw the cloth aside. She walked slowly around the bridge, looking at the screens and control panels with interest. She pressed a few buttons and brought up navigation data, communication logs, shipping records. "Tell me, Captain," she said without looking at him, "in all your years of capturing humans, did you ever wonder why we let you?" Tal blinked. "Let us? You did not let us. We took what we wanted. We are stronger than you." "Are you?" Turned to face him. There was something in her eyes now, something cold and hard as iron. "The Consortium has been raiding human colonies in the Outer Rim for 30 years. You have taken thousands of our people. You have killed thousands more. And in all that time, has human military ever come to stop you?" Tal thought about this. It was true that human forces had never seriously tried to shut down the slave trade. There had been some patrols, some rescue missions, but nothing that threatened the Consortium's operations. He had always assumed this was because humans were too weak to fight back. "We thought you were afraid," he said. "We wanted you to think that." Pulled a chair from one of the dead officers and sat down across from him. She crossed her legs and leaned back like she was having a casual conversation with a friend. "The truth is much simpler. We needed information." Information. Your slave routes, your buyer networks, your contacts in the outer rim governments who look the other way, the locations of your hidden stations and supply depots, the names of every person who profits from selling human beings. Smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "It took us 30 years to map it all. We needed people on the inside, prisoners who could watch and listen and remember." Tal felt his blood grow cold. "You are saying you let us capture you on purpose?" "I volunteered for this mission," said. "I spent 6 months living on that mining colony waiting for your ship to arrive. I knew your patrol schedules. I knew exactly when and where you would attack. I let your guards take me. I let them chain me in your cargo hold, and I watched everything." "But why reveal yourself now? Why not wait until we reach station?" "Because I have all the information I need." Stood and walked to the communication console. She pressed several buttons and a list of files appeared on the screen. 3 weeks of observation, guard rotations, security codes, ship layouts, communication frequencies. Everything about your operation is now stored in a data chip inside my tooth. She tapped her jaw and smiled again. "In 20 minutes you destroyed my entire crew," Tal said slowly. "You could have done this at any time. You could have escaped the first night." "I could have," agreed. "But escaping was never the mission. The mission was to gather intelligence and transmit it to Colonial Command." She pressed another button and a new screen appeared. "Which I just did. Everything I learned about your operation is now in the hands of human military intelligence. By this time tomorrow, they will know every secret the consortium has tried to hide." Tal understood now. He understood why this small woman had sat quietly for 3 weeks while his guards abused her and threatened her. He understood why she had let hit her without fighting back. She had been waiting for the right moment. She had been playing a game that he never even knew existed. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you tell me about Station." "Station?" Tal laughed bitterly. "You think I will betray my own people? You think I will help you destroy everything I built?" His expression did not change. "You will tell me everything, the guard positions, the security systems, the weaknesses in the station's defenses, the locations where slaves are kept, all of it." "And if I refuse?" Reached into her belt and pulled out a small device. It looked like a medical tool, with a thin needle at one end and a digital display at the other. She held it up so Tal could see it clearly. "This is a neural stimulator," she said. "It was designed by human doctors to help patients who suffer from chronic pain. It sends electrical signals directly into the nerve system, blocking pain receptors and providing relief." She pressed a button, and the device hummed softly. "It can also do the opposite. It can make the nerve system feel pain that is not there, terrible pain, the kind of pain that makes people lose their minds." She looked at Tal with those calm, cold eyes. "I have been trained to use this tool. I know exactly which nerves to target, exactly how much stimulation to apply, exactly how long to maintain the signal before permanent damage occurs." Tal stared at the device. He had used torture many times in his long life. He had hurt people to get what he wanted without any feeling of guilt, but he had never been on the other side. He had never been the one facing the tool instead of holding it. "You would not," he said, but his voice was weak. "I spent 3 weeks watching your guards beat prisoners for entertainment," said quietly. "I watched them break bones and burn flesh and laugh while their victims screamed. I watched them do things that I will never forget, no matter how long I live." She leaned closer. "Do you really think there is anything I would not do to stop you?" Tal looked into her eyes and saw the truth there. She was not bluffing. She was not trying to scare him. She meant every word. "Station," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want to know?" Over the next 2 hours, he told her everything. The guard rotations that changed every 6 hours. The security codes that only the commanders knew. The weak points in the station's shields where a small strike force could slip through. The underground levels where thousands of slaves were kept in cages, waiting to be sold. He told her about the fighting pits where humans and other species were forced to kill each other for entertainment. He told her about the breeding facilities where female prisoners were kept like animals. He told her about the children who were taken from their parents and trained to serve masters. He told her everything, and when he was done, he felt empty inside. Recorded it all. When the recording was finished, she stood and walked to the door. "What happens to me now?" Tell asked. Paused at the door, she did not turn around. "You will live," she said. "You will be taken to a human prison where you will spend the rest of your very long life thinking about what you did. And when you die, alone and forgotten, nobody will remember your name." She walked out, leaving Tal alone with the bodies of his crew and the ruins of his empire. In the cargo hold, and the other freed prisoners had been busy. They had gathered weapons and supplies. They had locked the one surviving guard in a storage room. They had found the ship's medical bay and treated the wounded. When appeared in the doorway, they all stopped and stared. "The ship is ours," she announced. "We are changing course. We are taking you home." A cheer rose from the prisoners. Some of them cried. Some of them hugged each other. Some simply stood in shock, unable to believe that they were finally free. Walked over too. He looked at her with new eyes, seeing her clearly for the first time. "Colonial intelligence," he asked quietly. "Special Activities Division." Looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "I knew it," he said. "I knew there was something different about you." "You are conscripted," said. "I need people I can trust. Are you interested?" Thought about his old life in the Colonial Defense Force. He thought about the months he had spent as a prisoner, believing he would die in chains. He thought about everything he had seen in the last hour. "Yes," he said, "I am interested." Good turned to address all the prisoners. "We have a long journey ahead. Station is the largest slave trading center in this sector. In 3 weeks, human forces will attack it. Thousands of slaves will be freed. But I need intelligence from people who have been inside. I need volunteers." Hands rose throughout the cargo hold. Every former prisoner wanted to help. Every one of them wanted revenge on the people who had taken their freedom. Smiled. It was the first genuine smile any of them had seen from her. "Then let us begin," she said. 3 weeks after the Wandering Star changed course, Station burned. The station was massive. It hung in space like a metal moon, nearly 50 kilometers across. For 100 years, it had been the center of the slave trade in this sector of the galaxy. Millions of beings had passed through its markets, sold like animals to the highest bidder. The consortium had grown rich and powerful here, protected by shields and weapons, and the belief that no one would ever challenge them. They were wrong. The attack began at midnight station time. 30 human warships dropped out of hyperspace at the same moment, appearing from nowhere like ghosts. They came from different directions, hitting the station from all sides at once. The defense fleet tried to respond, but they were confused and unorganized. They had never expected an attack of this size. They had never expected an attack at all. The warships fired on the station's shield generators first. Intelligence had identified exactly where they were and exactly how to destroy them. Within 10 minutes, station's shields were down, and assault teams were landing on the outer platforms. Sarah was one of the first to step onto the station. She was a young human woman, only 23 years old, with short black hair and hard eyes that had seen too much suffering. She had spent 2 years in the fighting pits of station, forced to kill other slaves for entertainment. She had watched friends die in the arena. She had felt their blood on her hands. Now she was back, wearing colonial marine armor and carrying a plasma rifle. And she was not alone. Behind her came 100 soldiers, all volunteers who had survived captivity. They knew the station's layout better than any military intelligence could provide. They knew where the prisoners were kept. They knew where the guards would be hiding. They knew everything. Squad 7 moved to the lower levels, Sara ordered through her helmet communicator. The breeding facilities are there. Get those women out first. Squad 8, take the children's quarters. We do not leave anyone behind. The team split up and moved through the station like water through cracks in stone. Alarms screamed everywhere. Red lights flashed on every wall. Guards ran in every direction, trying to organize a defense that was already failing. In the fighting pits, a commander named Taro tried to rally his soldiers. He stood in the center of the arena where he had watched thousands of slaves kill each other, screaming orders at guards who were too scared to listen. "Hold your positions," he shouted. "They are just humans, they are weak. We can." A plasma bolt took him in the chest. He fell backward into the sand that was still stained with the blood of his victims. Sora stepped into the arena, her rifle smoking. She looked down at his body without any emotion on her face. "Not so weak now," she said quietly. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, Station was a burning ruin floating in space. The defense fleet had been destroyed. Thousands of slaves had been freed and were being transported to human rescue ships. The slave markets were empty. The fighting pits were silent. A young girl, no more than 8 years old, walked out of the flames holding Sora's hand. She had been born in the station, the child of slaves, and had never seen the sky of any world. She did not understand what was happening. She only knew that the nice human woman had told her she was safe now. "Where are we going?" the girl asked. Sora looked down at her. For a moment her hard expression softened. "Home," she said. "We are going home." Across the galaxy, news of Station spread like fire. Traders and merchants carried the story from port to port. Pirates whispered about it in hidden bases. Governments received official reports and classified them immediately, afraid of what they might mean. The consortium demanded answers. They sent angry messages to human governments, threatening war and destruction. They claimed that the attack was an act of aggression against a sovereign species. They demanded the return of their property. The human response came 3 days later. It was not sent through diplomatic channels. It was not addressed to any government or military command. Instead, it was broadcast on every communication frequency in the sector, public and private, so that everyone could hear it. The message was simple. Humanity remembers every name, every world, every life you took. We are not weak. We are not prey. We simply choose when to show our teeth. You have spent centuries laughing at us, taking our people, selling them like animals. Consider this your warning. Do not hit us again. The message was not signed, but everyone knew where it came from. Some species laughed at the warning. They called it propaganda, empty words from a species that had just gotten lucky. They pointed to the fact that humans had allowed the slave trade to continue for 30 years. They said that one attack did not change anything. But others listened more carefully. Others remembered stories they had heard over the years. Stories about humans who did impossible things. Stories about colonies that should have fallen to invaders but somehow survived. Stories about small groups of humans defeating enemies 10 times their size. These listeners began to ask questions. They began to look at the humans around them with new eyes. They began to wonder what else they had been wrong about. On a small ship with no name and no official registration, reviewed the results of the station operation. 15,000 slaves freed. The largest slave market in the sector destroyed. Intelligence gathered that would lead to dozens of smaller operations over the coming months. It was a good start, but it was only a start. She pulled up a list of targets on her screen. Slave stations, pirate bases, secret facilities where humans and other species were still being held against their will. There were hundreds of them scattered across the galaxy. Each one would need to be found, studied, and destroyed. It would take years, maybe decades, but had time, and she had something more important than time. She had patience. Walked into the small room that served as her office. He had changed in the weeks since station. He stood now. His eyes were clearer. The hopeless prisoner she had first met in the cargo hold was gone, replaced by something harder and more determined. "The former prisoners are settling into their quarters," he reported. "Most of them want to continue fighting. They want to help with the next mission." "Good," marked another target on her list. "We will need all the help we can get." "Do you think it will make a difference?" asked. "The message, I mean, do you think they will actually stop?" Was quiet for a long moment. She thought about, and his laugh when she had asked him not to hit her again. She thought about Captain Tal and his belief that humans were weak and helpless. She thought about the centuries of history that had taught the galaxy to see humanity as prey. "Some will stop," she finally said. "The smart ones, the ones who understand what the message really means." She turned to look at. "The others will learn the hard way." "And what does the message really mean?" Smiled. It was not a warm smile or a friendly smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just spotted her next target. "It means that we have been playing a long game. It means that every time they hurt us, we were watching and learning and remembering. It means that the galaxy has been looking at humans and seeing prey when they should have been seeing predators in disguise." She turned back to her screen and selected the next target. "It means," she said quietly, "that the hunt is just beginning." In the darkness of space, the unnamed ship moved toward its destination. Inside it, a small woman with calloused hands planned the next battle in a war that the galaxy did not yet know it was losing. And somewhere in every corner of civilization, humans who had been overlooked and underestimated smiled quietly to themselves. They knew the truth. Humanity had never been prey. Humanity had simply been waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had finally arrived.